So look, before you hear this story from someone else and get the completely wrong idea about what went down, let me tell you exactly what happened. Because apparently, choosing to wear what makes me feel confident automatically makes me the bad guy in everyone's eyes. I'm Naomi, I'm 26, and up until recently, I was seeing this guy Mason for about 3 months. He's 29, works at some corporate office doing whatever boring shit corporate people do all day, and I genuinely thought we had something real developing between us. We met the modern way, through a dating app, and honestly, the first couple months were pretty amazing. Mason seemed like he actually had his life figured out, you know? His own apartment, steady paycheck, didn't live with 3 roommates like most guys my age. I was starting to think I'd finally found someone mature who wasn't going to waste my time with stupid games and pointless drama. God, was I wrong about that? But here's what I should have picked up on from the beginning. Mason was always dropping these subtle hints about how I should dress when we went places together. Never outright telling me what to wear, because that would be too obvious, but making these passive-aggressive suggestions about looking appropriate or put together. Like when we went to that upscale restaurant downtown for our 2-month anniversary, he casually mentioned I might want to bring a sweater just in case the air conditioning is too cold. It was the middle of summer. It wasn't about temperature. Then this work situation came up. Some big client party at his boss's house, and Mason starts acting like it's the most career-defining moment of his entire professional life. This is really important for my future at the company, Naomi. Everything needs to go smoothly. Okay, fine. I understand that work events matter for advancement and networking, but the way he said it made me feel like I was some kind of liability he needed to manage, rather than his girlfriend. He was excited to introduce to his colleagues. And let's talk about how this was literally the first time in 3 months that he'd invited me to anything work-related. Suddenly I'm worthy of meeting his professional circle? Part of me wondered if he'd been deliberately keeping me separate from that part of his life, because he didn't think I was polished enough or sophisticated enough for his corporate world. But I pushed those insecurities aside because I was genuinely excited about this opportunity. I saw it as a major step forward in our relationship. I made a special shopping trip specifically for this event. Spent $200 that I honestly couldn't afford on this absolutely gorgeous black dress that made me look incredible. It was perfectly fitted to show off my figure, a little shorter than what I usually wore, but definitely not inappropriate, with a neckline that was interesting without being scandalous. I felt like $1 million wearing it. Even the sales associate at the store told me I looked stunning and that any guy would be lucky to have me as his date. That evening, I was so excited to show Mason how amazing I looked that I sent him a full mirror selfie in the dress. Perfect lighting, best angle, the whole production. I looked absolutely hot and I knew it. I was expecting him to be completely blown away, maybe send back some fire emojis or tell me how incredible I looked and how lucky he felt. Instead, I get this response. That dress is way too revealing for this type of professional event. You're gonna need to wear something else. Are you fucking serious right now? I just dropped my grocery money for the week on this dress specifically for his work party, and he's telling me it's not suitable? I immediately texted back asking what exactly was wrong with it, and he launches into this condescending lecture about professional standards and making the appropriate impression on important clients. Since when is looking attractive and confident a negative thing? Mason kept pushing the issue, suggesting I should wear something more conservative and business appropriate, like a blazer with dress pants, to a cocktail party, a social event. I told him that absolutely was not happening. I bought this specific dress for his specific event. I looked amazing in it, and I was planning to wear it. He refused to drop the subject, going on and on about how my appearance would reflect on him professionally, how his boss and these crucial clients would be judging both of us. The more he complained and criticized, the more angry and stubborn I became. Why should I have to dress like some boring corporate drone just because he was worried about what his coworkers might think about his girlfriend's body? I'm not his employee or his property. I'm supposed to be his partner. If he was genuinely embarrassed by how I looked, then we obviously had much bigger relationship problems than a single dress choice. I told him flat out that if he couldn't handle having a confident, attractive girlfriend who knew how to dress her body, then that was entirely his problem to work through, not mine to fix by changing who I was. Looking back now, maybe I should have just picked something different to avoid the whole confrontation and keep the peace between us. But in that moment, it felt like he was trying to control and change me, trying to mold me into some version of myself that would make him more comfortable. And honestly, I still don't think that dress was actually inappropriate. The next day, Mason called me instead of just texting, which should have been my first warning sign that he was about to say some serious shit that I wasn't going to like. His voice had that artificially calm tone that guys use when they think they're being perfectly reasonable, but they're actually being complete manipulative assholes about everything. Naomi, I've been doing some thinking about our conversation last night, and I really need you to understand just how important this particular event is for my career trajectory. He begins, like I'm some kind of idiot who doesn't comprehend that professional networking matters. But then he drops the real bomb on me. If you can't dress appropriately for this occasion, then maybe it would be better if you didn't come with me at all. Just like that. Not, let's work together to find a compromise we both feel good about, or what if we went shopping together to find something we both liked? He was straight up threatening to uninvite me from what was supposed to be our first real public appearance as a serious couple in his professional world. Over a fucking dress. I genuinely could not believe what I was hearing from him. Any normal, healthy boyfriend would be proud and excited to show up at a work event with a hot, confident girlfriend on his arm, not embarrassed and ashamed of her appearance. I told him he was being completely ridiculous, that he was acting like I was planning to show up practically naked or something equally outrageous. But Mason absolutely would not budge from his position or consider any middle ground. Then came the ultimatum that really revealed his true character. Either you wear something more conservative and professional, or I'm going to take someone else as my date. Someone else? Like he just had a roster of backup women sitting around waiting for their chance? That's when everything suddenly clicked into place. This whole dress controversy wasn't really about professional appropriateness at all. He was actively looking for an excuse to take someone else to this party. Probably that Lisa woman from his office who he was constantly mentioning in casual conversation. You know what? Fine. I decided to call his bluff completely. I told him that if he was truly that ashamed and embarrassed of me as his girlfriend, then he could absolutely take whoever the hell he wanted to his precious work party. I wasn't going to beg and plead to be someone's date, and I definitely wasn't going to allow him to dictate what I wore, like I was his employee or his child. Part of me genuinely thought he would realize how unreasonable and controlling he was being and eventually back down from his position, but absolutely not. He just said, okay, fine. Like our entire 3-month relationship meant absolutely nothing to him. Like I was completely disposable and replaceable. And apparently I was totally replaceable. Because guess who ended up being his date to the big, important work party? That's right, Lisa, from whatever boring department she works in at his company. So Mason actually followed through on his threat. He took Lisa to his crucial career-defining work event, and I discovered this fact in the most humiliating way imaginable, mindlessly scrolling through social media and stumbling across the photographic evidence. One of his coworkers had posted multiple pictures from the party, and there's Mason looking all polished and professional in his expensive suit, with Lisa clinging to his arm like she'd always belonged there in that position. She was wearing this incredibly boring, matronly navy blue dress that looked like something a 70-year-old woman would wear to a funeral. Buttoned all the way up to her chin, long sleeves, the whole ultra-modest conservative thing. Exactly what Mason had desperately wanted me to look like, apparently. God forbid anyone at his work party catch a glimpse of his girlfriend's collarbone or shoulders. But here's what really twisted the knife in my chest. They looked genuinely happy and comfortable together in every single photograph. Not awkward or forced like a last-minute replacement situation, but actually happy, like they'd been a couple for years instead of whatever this arrangement actually was. Mason had his arm wrapped around her waist in this confident, possessive way that he'd never once done with me in any public setting. They were both smiling and laughing, looking like the absolutely perfect corporate power couple. Meanwhile, I'm sitting alone in my apartment wearing my supposedly inappropriate dress, stress-eating Chinese takeouts straight from the container, and obsessively scrolling through their happy photos like some kind of pathetic digital stalker. I called my best friend Mia to vent about the whole situation, and she tried her best to make me feel better by insisting that Mason was being controlling and manipulative, and that I was actually lucky to discover his true personality before wasting any more time on him. But honestly, seeing those photographs of them together hurt way more than I was willing to admit out loud to anyone, including myself. It felt like Mason had found exactly what he'd been looking for in a partner, and it definitely wasn't me. Lisa looked like she fit seamlessly and perfectly into his professional world. Polished, conservative, safe, predictable. Everything I apparently wasn't and never could be. The very next day, I was beyond furious about the entire situation. Not hurt or sad anymore, just straight up pissed off and ready for a fight. I called Mason and absolutely let him have it with both barrels. I told him he was a shallow, controlling piece of shit who obviously couldn't handle being in a relationship with a confident, attractive woman who knew her own worth. I said Lisa looked boring as hell and basic as fuck. And if that's what genuinely excited him, then good luck building a life with his completely generic girlfriend. He barely responded to anything I was saying, just kept repeating in that same artificially calm voice that I was proving his point about being overly dramatic and difficult to deal with. Dramatic? For being legitimately upset that my boyfriend of 3 months had replaced me at an important work event? For being angry and hurt that he'd chosen some random female coworker over the woman he'd been sleeping with and supposedly dating? The absolute worst part of this whole mess was knowing that every single person at that work party now assumed that Lisa was his serious girlfriend. His boss, those important clients he'd been so worried about impressing, all of his professional colleagues, they'd all been introduced to her as his official date and partner. And she probably soaked up every second of that attention and validation, getting to play dress-up in his corporate world, while I got tossed aside like yesterday's garbage. I started obsessing over how long he might have been planning this entire betrayal. Had he been actively looking for some excuse to take Lisa to this party all along? Was I just the temporary placeholder girlfriend until he worked up the courage to make his real move on his coworker? The more I analyzed our entire relationship history, the more obvious it became that I'd been completely played and manipulated from the very first day. Within just 1 week, it became crystal clear that Mason and Lisa were officially together as a real couple. Not just work friends who'd attended one company event together, they were actually dating now. I spotted them having an intimate lunch at this trendy cafe downtown, engaging in all the classic couple behaviors that Mason had barely bothered with when we were together. Sharing food off each other's plates, holding hands across the table, the whole disgusting romantic performance. What really got under my skin was that Mason didn't even have the basic decency or respect to properly break up with me first before moving on to his new relationship. He just seamlessly transitioned to Lisa without any conversation or closure. When I finally confronted him directly about the situation, he claimed that we'd been obviously incompatible from the beginning, and that the dress controversy had revealed everything he needed to know about our fundamental relationship dynamics and my character. Like I was the fucking problem in this scenario. Like I was the one who couldn't communicate effectively or make reasonable compromises. Never mind that he was the one issuing ultimatums and threatening to replace me the second I didn't immediately fall in line with his controlling demands about my appearance and self-expression. I kept mentally replaying that entire evening, wondering if I should have just swallowed my pride and worn something different to keep him happy. But every single time I considered that possibility, I got angry all over again about the principle of the thing. Why was it automatically my responsibility to make him feel comfortable and secure, instead of his job as my boyfriend to support and appreciate me exactly as I was? My friend group was completely split on the whole situation when I told them what had happened. Mia was 100% on my side, insisting that Mason was manipulative and controlling, and that I deserved so much better than someone who would try to change my personality and appearance. But some of my other friends thought I was being unnecessarily stubborn and difficult, arguing that I should have just worn a different dress if it was truly that important to him and his career. Easy for them to say when they weren't the ones being told they looked slutty and inappropriate. The most painful part was having to watch Mason and Lisa's picture-perfect relationship unfold in real time on social media over the following months. They were constantly posting adorable couple photos, going to expensive restaurants that Mason had never taken me to, hitting all the traditional relationship milestones that he'd never even mentioned during our time together. It genuinely looked like he'd found his ideal match and soulmate, while I was just some regrettable mistake he'd made along his journey to finding true love. But you know what? Good for them, I guess. If Mason wanted some boring, submissive corporate robot who would never challenge him intellectually or make him question any of his decisions, then Lisa was absolutely perfect for that role. I just couldn't wrap my head around why he'd bothered wasting 3 entire months of both our lives if that's what he'd been looking for from the very beginning. 8 months later, I was still completely single and honestly pretty bitter about everything that had transpired. Every guy I attempted to date seemed to have some major issue with how I dressed, how I expressed myself, or what I expected from a romantic partnership. It was like Mason had somehow cursed me or put some kind of hex on my dating life. I started seriously wondering if maybe there really was something fundamentally wrong with my personality or approach to relationships. Maybe I was genuinely too much for most men to handle long term. Maybe I expected too much emotional investment or came on too strong too quickly. These dark thoughts would creep into my mind during my lowest moments, usually late at night when I was swiping through dating apps and getting absolutely nowhere with anyone. Then I saw the social media announcement that completely shattered what was left of my self-confidence. Mason and Lisa had gotten engaged. Fucking engaged. After less than 10 months of being together. The Facebook post featured professional engagement photographs and a diamond ring that probably cost more than I earned in an entire year. All of their mutual friends and family members were commenting about how perfect and meant to be their relationship was. How they were clearly soulmates who'd found their other half. That's when the devastating truth finally hit me like a freight train to the chest. Mason had never, not even once, seen me as potential marriage material. Throughout our entire 3 months together, he'd never brought up our future as a couple, or where our relationship might be heading long-term. I was just the fun, temporary practice girlfriend, while he figured out what he actually wanted in a life partner. Lisa was the woman he could confidently bring home to meet his conservative parents. She was the one who would fit seamlessly into every aspect of his corporate professional world. She was the one who would never embarrass him at work functions or challenge his ideas about how women should behave and present themselves. She was wife material, and I was apparently just experience. I tried desperately to convince myself that I was genuinely better off without him, that I didn't want to spend my life with someone who couldn't appreciate and celebrate me for exactly who I authentically was. But seeing those engagement photos, witnessing how genuinely happy and content they looked together, it was impossible not to feel like I'd lost something truly valuable and important. Mia kept insisting that I should feel grateful that Mason had revealed his true controlling nature before I'd wasted any more of my precious time and emotional energy on him. She was convinced I'd dodged a major bullet, that any man who would try to dictate and control what I wore wasn't worth keeping around anyway. And logically, maybe she was absolutely right about that assessment. But it's incredibly difficult to feel grateful when you're forced to watch your ex-boyfriend build his dream life with someone else, while you're still struggling to figure out where everything went so terribly wrong. It's hard not to obsess over what might have happened if I just compromised that one time, if I'd swallowed my pride and worn the boring, conservative dress he'd wanted me to wear. Would I be the one wearing that engagement ring and planning a wedding? Would I be the one posting happy couple photos and making future plans with someone who actually chose me? Would I be the one who finally got picked instead of being the one who got replaced and forgotten? The brutal truth is, I still don't believe I did anything fundamentally wrong by choosing to wear that dress. It made me feel confident, attractive, and powerful. And if Mason couldn't handle having a girlfriend who was comfortable with her own sexuality and beauty, then that was absolutely his problem to work through, not mine to fix by changing myself. But sometimes, during those quiet moments when I'm completely alone with my thoughts and insecurities, I can't help but wonder if being right about the principle was worth ending up alone. If standing up for myself and my values was worth watching someone else get everything I thought I wanted from life. If my pride and stubbornness were worth more than the chance at the kind of lasting relationship that Mason ultimately built with Lisa. I suppose I'll never know the answer to that question for certain. But one thing I know without any doubt is that I'm not changing who I fundamentally am for anyone, ever again. If that means staying single for the rest of my life, then that's just how things are going to be. At least I'll be true to myself and my values, even if that authenticity means ending up completely alone while everyone else around me moves on to bigger and better things.